Welcome to the Secure Communities Forum. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, depending on your time zone. My name is Eitan Charnoff. I'm a medic, firefighter, and urban search and rescue officer, as well as an advisor to the Secure Communities Forum. The forum was really set up in order to create the most multi-stakeholder dialogue possible on the cadre of public safety risks and topics that impact communities globally. Today's event is going to focus on the public safety implications of climate change, how that impacts all of us in the sector and how that impacts communities.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For both guests and attendees participating for the first time, the Secure Community Forum is an initiative supported by UAE Ministry of Interior. Rather than looking at the security matters from a top-down perspective, we took a community-centric approach, focusing on the intersection of a universal security challenges and the local communities. Our objective here is to provide a platform where professionals across diverse disciplines such as law enforcement, technology, civil society, and others can come together to network, learn, and share ideas on a global level and coordinate to better address the most pressing issues impacting our communities. The recent global heat wave we experienced this summer is a great example of why climate change is such a topic. Climate change will create a new challenge for law enforcement as we provide a support and safety for a future migrant population, for firefighters as they encounter more frequent and intense wildfires with increased limited water resources to combat them, for emergency medical services as they will need to provide medical assistance and ever more intense natural disaster. And lastly, for our communities themselves as they seek to establish better resilience levels to mitigate the risk of climate change. We hope this event will provide a baseline of knowledge and topic of the new climate change impact public security and spark a future conversation and collaboration between professional law enforcement and emergency services with the community and civil society they are meant to protect.
Thank you. Thanks to the United Arab Emirates and also to CSF. I think it's very exciting to be part of a webinar which actually brings together this many different stakeholders. In my intervention, I would like to share with you which crime threats are most relevant for governments when they decide to step up in the area of climate change. Law enforcement agencies can actually can have a great impact in two areas. The first is their own footprint, controlling their own footprint, which is obviously out of the scope of this talk today. And the second one is being active in the fight against environmental crimes. At Interpol, we see environmental crime as an international security issue. We realize there's more work to do in the law enforcement world when it comes to raising awareness in their role in addressing climate change, and also on the impact of these crimes in the short and the long run. But if you would ask me, how do we turn the tide? I do not think it is through law enforcement action. We can never arrest our way out of this problem, which is an expression which applies to a lot of crime areas. It's in the end about the larger societal issue, and we are part of this puzzle. However, at Interpol, we believe that countries can have a meaningful impact on this issue when they integrate environmental crime approaches into their daily work, and when they proudly include this as one of their priorities.
Let me start with the new crime threats that come in, and there refer back also to the very good presentation from our Interpol colleague. No question, environmental crime will rise, because it's clear that all governments will step up their efforts to protect the environment, but this at the same time also will develop also a system or an ecosystem for more crime to come up very soon. So I fully agree to Ms. de Wild's analysis that this is something where we all together need to pay more attention to. What I also would like to underline is the likelihood of global migration flows. We see this already, that climate change impacts massively migration flows, and it's likely that this will come up in a even by far bigger scale in the future. And what we have seen over many years that all the migration flows develop a criminal ecosystem around the illegal migrants, means that criminals try to exploit these poor people, and law enforcement needs to pay sufficient attention for this one as well. I'm sure there will be new phenomena of serious and organized crime caused by climate change. We have seen this during the COVID-19 pandemic, that criminal organized crime groups have been very agile to adjust to the pandemic situation and to exploit. So we need to strengthen the cooperation with all civil protection services on the local, regional, and international level, because I think for the future we will see phenomena that we only can deal with if the countries all together work together. On a more practical level, we need to think deeper about the interoperability of radio systems, be it already on the local and on the regional level, that really all the services can talk to each other if necessary in such a crisis situation, but also in case if we bring supporting staff from other regions or other countries in. As police services, we also should consider for the future components of personal protection equipment for the police, because police needs to come in, for instance, in situations like wildfire.
You know, we go back to what we learned in third grade, the fire triangle, right? You have heat, you have fuel, and you have oxygen. And in this case, the heat is the ignition points. And the ignition points today are more and more people are living in the urban interface. That means that you have more power lines, more ignition points that can really spark a fire. So the first thing you need to be in a crisis situation or a more dangerous situation is more ignition points. The second problem we have is an overabundance of fuel. As we're sitting here, you know, every year more fuel is being added to the forest. The forests are getting denser and more dangerous. And then the third thing is obviously what we're going to do about putting the fires out. And we have, whether you're wherever you are on the climate change spectrum, we're in serious drought situations here. Most of the most dangerous fires in the world are human caused in high wind events. Okay, they're not natural caused wildfires. Most really dangerous fires, that's how they start. The importance of protecting communities, because I think Eitan, you and the Major, that's why we're here today, to do what we can.
Thank you for shining a light on so many of these issues that really do affect us all. What happens when people can't eat? Food insecurity is directly linked to desperation, to violence, to emigration, to migration, to immigration. And who is at the greatest risk of hunger? Billions of people, a ballooning number, and over 80% of them reside in regions that are most susceptible to climate extremes. What we see is climate change directly jeopardizing the agricultural systems upon which we depend, upon which our societies depend, upon which we have built for hundreds and thousands of years. And whether that's too hot or too cold, whether that is on fire or underwater, inundated by rain, or suffering from scorching temperatures, we're already seeing worsening conflict over clean water and arable lands. There are major pockets of famine. We don't have to say they're coming, they're here. So people go in search of that clean water, of those fertile lands to survive. And that leads to an increase in all of the issues that come with that: influxes of refugees, societal burdens, division, violence, and overall civil unrest. It's about preparedness and adaptation, but it's also about solidarity and mitigation as early as possible. And that's today.
Those communities, as Erin mentioned, some people are very vulnerable, more than others, like migrants, children, women, persons with disabilities, indigenous people, people living in small islands. Recently, you know, I'm a surfer, and I have a friend in the Mile Lives, and he told me that his grandparents' graves were being washed now in the ocean, and maybe in few years he will have to leave his house because of the sea level rising. So we really need to tackle this issue and talk about it seriously, because so far we've noticed that there is no legal definition for the climate change refugees. They are not defined as refugees under the UN Refugee Convention. So as a result, some people may fall through the cracks when it comes to protection by law enforcement. Basically make a better relationship between civil society on one hand and law enforcement and firefighters on the other hand. So I put some ideas, but I'm really open to any exchange, any we can discuss and open the floor for discussions after. But basically we can improve the population access to information.
I hope that this is just the beginning of an ongoing discussion. And I hope that the really diverse, like seemingly unrelated speakers today came together in this very cohesive discussion that show that there's so many touch points that need to be addressed together to create really holistic public security as this situation develops. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you also to our attendees.